How did you set that up?
This
Good evening. We're thrilled to have everyone here. Our hope this evening is that this is not a one-sided conversation. So we hope you'll ask questions, make comments. We have microphones to pass around. And so our hope is that this will be a discussion for all of us. I'm joined by two wonderful people this evening, both of whom have much deeper histories than I do here, but I'm really thrilled to be able to share this space with both of them. Kathy Mcintyre Seltman is a practicing OBGYN for, do I dare ask how many years?
40
generations.
Something.
For generations.
40 and plus.
And has real world experience dealing with reproductive rights issues. And to my left, at least physically, I don't know if politically you're to my left, but that doesn't matter, is David Harris, who is a professor of law at the University of Pittsburgh. And I've asked both of them to come to share some thoughts this evening about how we look at abortion in a post-Roe world. The Supreme Court, as you know, in the Dobbs case this summer, made a fairly significant decision to overturn Roe versus Wade. And I thought it was important for us as a community to address some of these issues. So we'll begin with KMS, as she's known. And after she's done, I'll turn to David, and then I'll speak a little bit from the Jewish perspective. And along the way, we'll be open for questions. I've always found it better off not to interrupt a doctor, but if you want to interrupt her, feel free if you have a question. And hopefully they won't get in trouble, right?
I didn't hear what you said.
She said definitely you wouldn't interrupt a surgeon.
Well, I'm not operating right at this moment, so I welcome questions or things you think I should talk about and haven't. You know, from a medical standpoint, this change in the law has been concerning and challenging. There is a long history in this country. Even though abortion was illegal, abortion has always happened, going back to the founding of the country. There has always been abortion in this country. Sometimes it's been safer than other times. And I think the first biggest concern as a physician that I have is that if legal abortions are unavailable and illegal abortions rise again, the number of women and families that will be harmed, that will lose their reproductive ability, that will lose their lives. And some of you may be old enough to remember before Roe v. Wade what things were like. People who were privileged could get abortion. People who were not privileged could not get abortions and were disproportionately affected by illegal abortions. And from a medical community standpoint, that's our first biggest fear. The confusion that's going on now with, you may have heard or read doctors in the news saying, gosh, here's a patient situation. I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can do that. And women left unable to get care that they need because people are afraid. Physicians are afraid. They're afraid of being prosecuted. They're afraid that they're doing something outside the law when the law is unclear, and maybe you can help us out with that. But certainly from a state to state to state standpoint, it can get very confusing. So what I see is that there are physicians and clinics that are going around some of the current limitations. In Pennsylvania, abortion is still legal. There are restrictions, but abortion is still legal. Our clinics in Pittsburgh have been very busy. We've had people flying in from all over the place. We've had people fly in from Texas, go to the hospital, have a procedure done, get back on a plane. It's not best for people's care and for people's health. We have the option, I think for some background, we'll say a little bit about different kinds of abortions, if that's helpful. In the early part of pregnancy, up until about 10, 11 weeks from a woman's last menstrual period, Abortion can be carried out by a surgical procedure, which can be done in an office, is low risk, or can be done with medication, a combination of medications that act to block the hormone that women's bodies make that's needed to maintain the pregnancy, and then a second medication that causes the uterus to contract. So either of those is available, either is safe. Some women prefer come in the office, have something done, get it over with. Some women prefer the autonomy of caring for themselves at home in a more natural fashion. Both are equally safe and equally accessible. After that, though, abortion becomes more complicated. The pregnancy is more, as it's larger and as the placenta tissue is more adherent, it's a little bit more challenging. So the procedures done later in pregnancy, from the time of about 12, 13, 14 weeks up until whatever the legal limit is in the particular state we're talking about, are done in an operating room. The cervix has to be opened further, and it's more complex to get the pregnancy tissue out. So it's a little bit of a higher risk. Another concern that I and others in our community have is that with the barriers in place, that abortions for those women who can access abortion are being pushed to later times. So potentially greater risks to women and their families. So those are the issues that are of concern, particularly in Pennsylvania, where we do still have access to abortion. That may all change in November, depending on how the election goes. Yeah.
Okay, so the question was, I heard, I think, on some news program, NPR or something, that there may be penalties to getting those medications, so restrictions. I don't know if that's true if you live in Pennsylvania, or is that just other states, so, and that you could be prosecuted, I guess, in some states, like Texas probably. But. Like
Texas probably, yeah. That is, it is, medication abortion is legal in Pennsildania and is available in Pennsylvania.
So do you go to the pharmacy, or you send away for it?
It's the medication, the medications both are prescription medications. In Pennsylvania, it is required that there's a waiting period, there's a counseling time, and the woman is supposed to be observed taking the first of the medications, the second she can do at home. So there are some barriers. It's not like you can walk into a pharmacy and pick it up off the shelf.
I didn't know about you had
Yep.
to be observed. I had not heard that
Yep.
before.
The other thing, and that reminds me to say this, that some people think about emergency contraception, the morning after pill, as similar to the abortion pill. They're chemically different, they act differently. The morning after pill will not impact on a pregnancy that has already started. So they're two different things, and the morning after pills are available over the counter, but not abortion pills. So I want to be clear about the difference. Yeah. What the morning after pill does, there's two different medications available, but both of them act by interfering with release of an egg, so that if there was unprotected sex, that egg isn't available to be fertilized. So it does not, if there is a conception, the morning after pill won't stop it.
Do you need a prescription for the morning after?
No, you do
It's over
not.
the counter?
Over the counter.
Okay.
In some pharmacies, it's behind the counter. Sometimes you have to ask for it.
Okay.
There have been some controversies, I don't know, this is a little off subject, but there have been some pharmacy chains where pharmacists conscientiously object, or where the parent company has objected and not stocked them, but in general, that has been fought against. So in general, emergency contraception is available. Yeah.
How fast does conception come? Do you said after a couple of days?
Her question is, how fast does conception come? And that depends on where that woman is in her menstrual cycle. So that's a whole physiology lesson in action. But basically, when a woman is around the middle between her two periods,
You said like one day.
that's the time that she's most fertile. And so that if she has unprotected sex around that time, that's when she's most at risk.
So if you take the morning after pill the day before,
That's
would
called,
that prevent?
that's called oral contraceptives. You take them every day.
So then that pill wouldn't work then?
That's correct.
Okay, because you mentioned something about it preventing the egg from being fertilized. So if you take it before you
Yeah.
have the unprotected sex, then
Yeah,
no,
it does.
wouldn't work, huh?
It wouldn't work that way, no. So again, just to emphasize that while we're talking about the morning after pill or emergency contraception, that is separate from medication abortion. It's a totally different drug. It works totally differently. The medication abortion drug, you may have heard of it as RU46 back in the day. Its official name now is mifepristone. And that drug works by blocking progesterone, which is one of the two female hormones and the one that's responsible for maintaining pregnancy. And that's how it works. It blocks the receptors so that the pregnancy tissue does not see progesterone and it can't survive.
Are there pills that people can take every single day to prevent them from becoming pregnant?
Yes,
Okay, and that's not impacted by this?
not in any way. That's the normal run-of-the-mill birth control pill.
Right.
Yep, and that's not affected, and to my knowledge, there isn't any place right now that bans birth control pills in the United States.
Just wait.
Just
Yeah,
wait.
right. Yeah, I have granddaughters, and I worry about it.
There are lots of effective forms of contraception that are widely available.
Okay,
And at least again in Pennsylvania, there's plenty of funding for people of all ages
Okay.
who need contraception. There's all kinds of different contraceptives.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about what we've heard in other states of what doctors are afraid of, like in terms of like DNC and those other things where it's just normal women's health type of things that they're now sort of afraid to do?
So I think the issues that have gotten a lot of publicity are things like a woman comes in having a miscarriage. Can a doctor or healthcare provider do a DNC to complete that miscarriage? Or a woman who has an ectopic pregnancy that has a heartbeat, that means a pregnancy that's settled outside of the uterus, which is life-threatening. It cannot grow without sooner or later causing hemorrhage. And so can you treat that patient medically or surgically if that pregnancy has a heartbeat? Those issues really in all states have been addressed as being outside of the issues around abortion. Correct me if I'm wrong, but in Pennsylvania, if a woman looks like she's in the process of having a miscarriage, but the fetus is still alive, then we can't intervene. Is that correct? Well, let me put it this way. I work for UPMC, and we got a missive from UPMC about a week ago that said that, which was like, what? Either basically do a DNC to complete the process. If
Does
the
that mean-
woman,
Does that mean you wait
You
for the
wait.
process to,
Well, you wait until either the fetus isn't living or until that process of miscarrying has proceeded enough on its own that there's no going back.
how long a wait is that?
It depends. It depends. It could be a half hour, it could be a day.
I may be a physician, but I don't know OBGYN. If a miscarriage completes itself and the fetus is external to the woman's body, and let's just say it's viable if all were done. In other words, you don't intervene if that is the wish of the mother, or you do. I do not know the answer to that.
If the fetus is
If-
outside the body,
If the
You mean
fetus
if
has
it's-
been expelled,
if it's been expelled?
yes.
You mean if it has reached the age of where it's potentially viable? Then we intervene.
If mom says no, you still intervene.
If it is clearly at an age of viability, then we intervene.
And I don't ask that with any agenda, I just didn't know that. Thank you.
If the fetus is at an age where viability is iffy, so there's always that transition time between not viable, viable, and you either hope it goes this way or hope it goes that way, that's a different issue, and that is shared decision-making with the people caring for the family.
So there's a point there, though, where the medical personnel will ask the family, would you like us to do extraordinary efforts or palliative care, or? My mic is on, I think. Now is it on? Sorry.
This probably
This one's
interfered
not.
with it.
That's probably
Yeah.
interfering with it. So there's a point where the family is told, this baby is going to be delivered, or you've delivered this baby. How do you want us to, what kind of treatment do you want us to give? Do you want us to give extraordinary measures, palliative care? What is it? Is that still, is there still legal gray there?
Around that time where currently, that gestational age for a baby, for a pregnancy, is 24 weeks. When I was in training, it was 28 weeks. And that's because of advances in intensive care for newborns. So when I was a resident, if a baby was 27 weeks and 4 days, that was a time where we could either go, full all out or not. Now that time is 24 weeks. So if a woman's pregnancy is 23 weeks, she may still choose to have aggressive resuscitation. The success rate is very low, but she may make that choice. But she may also make a choice of palliative care or comfort measures only. So there is that gray zone, yeah. And you're going to come back to that, I bet.
Yeah, I will. What does it mean for physicians to live in fear of legal reprisal? And has that changed since the Dobbs decision this summer?
Yeah.
How does that affect you as a practicing physician, and how does that affect all healthcare providers?
Again, in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, it does not affect me very much because abortion remains legal. But if I were practicing in Texas, it would definitely affect me. You can detect when an embryo is a couple of millimeters in size. For those of you who think in inches, that's about a 1/15 of an inch. You can detect on ultrasound a little flicker. You don't see a heart, but under Texas law, that is a heartbeat. So the fetus, the embryo, is this big. That happens about a week and a half to 2 weeks after the woman misses her menstrual period. So if her periods are a little wacko, she may not even think about it. And by the time she gets to care, most of the time that has already happened. So if I practiced in Texas, almost no one would be eligible for abortion because it's very difficult to even diagnose pregnancy and get to health care by that time. And yes, that would definitely interfere. Rabbi?
I happened to sit for 20 years on the McGee Women's Ethics Committee, and we are struggling with this right now. The
Yeah.
providers, the nurses, and the doctors all this past week expressed great anguish.
Yeah.
My question is related to the politics of it insofar as the senator from South Carolina has proposed a hard federal 15-week ban, and my question is frankly anatomical. Are there lungs in a fetus at 15 weeks, and can they function? Because I know when people talk about a 6-week fetal heartbeat, as you said, that's not really a heart and it's not really a beat, it's activity.
Yeah. I mean, it's the beginnings of a heart. It's heart muscle, but it's not organized yet. There are lungs at 15 weeks, but they are incapable of breathing air. There is no way that a 15-week fetus could breathe air. The lungs aren't grown enough for that, and the chemistry of the inside of the lungs isn't developed enough for that.
Can I follow up? How large, what is the, with your fingers, can you show the size of a fetus at 15 weeks?
About like this.
Thank you. People have this idea that it's a full-grown baby or something like that.
It looks like a baby, but a whole lot littler. About this big. So there is a lot of anguish. I mean, I agree that there's a lot of anguish in terms of, has it changed my own practice? Not yet is my answer. If I lived in another state, the answer would be yes. In this state, we do the same things. Now, we have restrictions going back actually to Casey, the Casey decision, which was in 1992. Pennsylvania has a 24-hour waiting period, so from the time a woman comes requesting an abortion to an abortion provider, and that provider counsels that patient, she has to wait 24 hours before anything can be done, no matter how far away she lives. And there are restrictions on the verbiage of the counseling, and women have to be informed what the growth of their fetus is, what their fetus looks like at the particular gestational age they are. They have to be offered to see an ultrasound. They have to be offered materials, visual pictures of fetal development. They have to be offered information about having a child, parenting, and adoption. And that is required. There's a whole required language that has to take place, and that happened around the time of Casey.
So here's my question. If you tell the doctor that, I'm over here.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
She was
No,
kidding.
it's okay. If you tell the doctor that you're Jewish and you don't believe that there isn't a child until it's born, would you as a doctor still have to provide all that?
You don't have to look at it. You don't have to, you can decline. You're welcome to do that. Most women decline, but we are required to do that. We're required to read the script.
And require the 24 hours, everything else, like
All of that is required by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania laws. Yep. Yeah, what she asked
Is the
is,
advisor a medical doctor?
yes, and Pennsylvania, I tried to make it such that the person doing the counseling had to be the person that did the pregnancy termination. That did not go through.
So, and what about, we heard about this case of a 12-year-old kid or a 10-year-old. What about, do they have to have the parents' permission if they're under a certain age? Or is that a question for David?
In Pennsylvania, the requirement is that a minor has to either be emancipated, have parental permission, or go through a judicial bypass. If they either don't have parents or don't feel comfortable talking with their parents, they can go to a judge.
Is there a concern now that doctors won't go into your field because of the conundrum? Because as a lawyer, I know that in areas where there were high levels of medical malpractice, doctors stopped going into those areas
Yep.
and would practice in areas that were less likely to cause them a liability issue.
That's a great question, and that has come up. There is a lot of concern among medical students about choosing OBGYN as a career. And there certainly are concerns, and I mean, I've seen this myself, of where people choose to practice. We just interviewed at McGee somebody who practiced in Texas and was leaving Texas. She ended up not taking a job here because things in Pennsylvania could change so much based on the next election. And the uncertainty was such that she elected to take a job in a different state.
Doctor, perhaps this is obvious. We've been talking about Pennsylvania having a 24-hour waiting period. Are there states with no waiting period?
There are, not very many, but there are a few, yes.
I just wanted to add, I'm a physician, I'm a neurologist, very far away from your field. And I have a colleague, Arvind Venkat, and although this is not a political forum, he's running for a seat in the legislature in what had previously been a very heavily Republican area, who is very articulate about these things. I'll leave it at that.
I guess I will also say that there's information here to register to vote if anyone needs that. I'm guessing most of you are registered, but that is accessible here this evening.
I'm thinking about ectopic pregnancies, which make me shiver because, of course, there's a man running in Pennsylvania who said, under no condition can you perform an abortion. Well, if a person has this pregnancy, can they go to a judge, or is something they can they do something to be able to have an abortion?
At present, even in Texas and Louisiana, ectopic pregnancies are excluded because it's not considered an abortion. Is that going to always be that way? No. Have there been, I know of colleagues who have been hesitant to operate on a woman with an ectopic and who have taken time out that could be, sometimes if the woman's bleeding internally, you don't want to spend a lot of time, but who have contacted legal counsel before taking care of patients, and that's not right. I'm going to leave no time for him.
It's all right. We have
Okay,
plenty of time.
I don't know if this is for the doctor, the lawyer, or the rabbi.
Walked into
But-
a bar. And, no.
They walk in- Right.
Ouch, that hurt.
But what you just said, a woman comes in with an ectopic pregnancy, and that is potentially fatal. In the best case, very serious. And we're saying that doctors, you say a doctor may take time out to think about it. I don't know what that means.
Not think about it,
What
but
about-
get counsel, get legal
Okay.
counsel.
What about the medical oath to do what's best for your patient? I mean, isn't there and like I said, maybe, I don't know whose question this is, but isn't there an obligation on the part of the doctor to take care of the patient?
I'm going to answer that with one word, which is yes, and then I'm going to hear what my colleagues say.
I can answer it with two words. I agree.
Make a time to move on to one of the other panelists.
We're going to go to David in just a second. The short answer is that the Jewish view on this is radically different from the political view we're hearing in some states. The Jewish view would say that the health of the mother is paramount, first and foremost. And health is broadly defined. If one wanted to, one could rabbi search and find a rabbi who has a more broad definition or a less broad definition. But the health of the mother, in the case of an ectopic pregnancy, there isn't a whole lot of disagreement. The health of the mother is at risk. And so from a Jewish vantage point, the answer would be the woman needs to be treated. It's troubling that a physician might stop and think and go get legal counsel first, because you don't know what harm that's causing the patient. And so from a Jewish vantage point, while I understand it, the Jewish point would come down exactly with the physician's oath, which is take care of the patient in front of you. Let me, on that note, let me turn it over to David. The floor is yours.
Thank you.
Are we having a test afterwards?
We are not having a test afterwards. Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me? Hi. I'd like to thank the Rabbi for inviting us here tonight, and I bring the whole congregation very special greetings from a certain rabbi in Troy, Michigan, Rabbi Alicia, who many of you helped to raise. She's having a wonderful experience there, and send you her greetings and Shana Tova. I would like to take my few minutes in a little different fashion, if that's okay with you. I promise to not read all this. I wasn't going to do that anyway, but there are some quotes I want to give you, and I'd like you to save your questions for the end of my brief remarks, because there's enough here that I think will answer some of the questions you've asked the doctor and the rabbi, and some things that we haven't gotten into yet, and I want to make sure that we cover all of it. So hold on to your questions. I promise to answer every single one. What's happened with the Dobbs case? Number one, you got to know it's not a surprise. They were telegraphing this for at least a year, that they would do this, as far back as last September, when they refused to put an injunction to put a hold on the then most radical law, the Texas law. They let it go into effect. Then you had the stratospheric chutzpah before and after the last couple of elections of withholding Merrick Garland's Supreme Court nomination from even a debate or a vote, and getting Amy Coney Barrett into Ruth Bader Ginsburg's seat. This was coming, there was no doubt. And then we had the leak, of course, in May. And if you didn't know then, you just weren't paying attention. And of course, the case came out exactly as the leak suggested. Now, there's a whole other discussion we could have about the damage done to the Supreme Court by the leak itself. Trust within the court has got to be at an all-time low. They're not going to have any success pinning down how that happened, because those police that work for the Supreme Court don't do that, and yet they're handling it. And then there is the language in the Dobbs opinion itself, in which Justice Alito calls the right to abortion egregiously wrong and things like that, despite the fact that literally dozens of justices have signed off on it over the years. Again, kind of chutzpah being a great term for things. The decisions being hailed by many conservative politicians and pundits, as you know, but also by many religious conservatives. And for the reasons that the rabbi just told you, ironic is not the right word. I don't know what is the right word, but my religion doesn't take it that way. We have a conflict of religious values over this, not a settlement of any religious values in our law. And I think it's a very wrong way to look at it. And that's the way a lot of people are looking at it. But also keep in mind what is threatened here. The overturning of Roe versus Wade, Justice Alito told us, is all by itself. It's different than any other right that seemed in the past to be related. And there are a whole bunch of rights that sort of hang on the same branch of the tree. That branch is called constitutional privacy. It goes along with interracial marriage. It goes along with the right to use birth control. It goes along with the right to have intimacy with whoever you want as an adult. It goes along with same-sex marriage. Right? Justice Alito thinks that by his words he can fence those off and say, oh, no danger to those things. Well, we saw very clearly, if you read Justice Thomas's opinion in Dobbs, he's got some plans. How interestingly convenient that he doesn't mention interracial marriage in the things that are now to be overturned. I'm just saying. So, what's the current state of things right now? And this, I hope, will answer some of the questions you were throwing at the other panelists. It changes almost daily. It really does. I mean, just this past week, the new Ohio law right next to us that was going to be 6 weeks fetal heartbeat, great restrictions and so forth, was enjoined by an Ohio court and is now not in effect. So Ohio has roughly the same abortion laws that we do in Pennsylvania for now, for the next 14 days, or whatever it is. West Virginia passed an almost total ban this same week. So the thing is in play everywhere in a little different way all the time. All the time. And it is not settled yet. The only thing that is settled is that this is being played out at the level of states. Sorry, Senator Lindsey Graham, but that's the way it's going to be. And it is so confusing for so many people, not least of which is because it flies in the face of what the majority of people in this country and in most states, even red states, seem to want. Here's where I needed some of my quotes. So what we're heading for is very soon, roughly half the states will outright ban abortion or restrict it so greatly it can almost never be done. Fetal heartbeat, 6 weeks, things like that. It just won't, doctors won't be able to do it. And then roughly half the states will either allow it or allow it with some restrictions, more or less like Pennsylvania does now, 24-hour waiting periods, statements that have to be read, things like that. And yet, if you keep up with what people are thinking, the public could not be in a more different place. Here's just a few samples. According to the Pew Research poll that came out in middle of June, roughly 6 in 10 Americans say abortion should be legal in all or most cases. Another poll, AP and the NORC, another polling organization, majority in U.S. want legal abortion nationally, middle of July. Overwhelming majorities favor allowing abortion in specific cases, such as rape, incest, danger to the life of the pregnant person. Wall Street Journal, even more recently, September 1st, support for legalized abortion grows since Dobbs ruling, September 1st. Politico, 70%, here, you'll love this, 70% of Americans don't think politicians, quote, are informed enough about abortion to create fair policies. And this is a majority of both Democratic respondents and Republican respondents, 70%. When is the last time you heard 70% agreement about anything in this country? Right? And just to top it off, we were talking about Texas here, just to top it off, in Texas, having among the most restrictive laws on the books now, an NPR poll says that 6 in 10 people in Texas respond to their poll wanting abortion available in all or most cases. Now, I'm going to come back to why this is happening in just a minute, but I want to say a couple of things before I do that. These bans just keep on coming, and they're going to keep on coming till that roughly half the states, 25, 28, whatever it turns out to be, are putting abortion really out of reach for most intents and purposes. Doctors, as you heard, just trying to cope, trying to figure out what do these laws mean, because these laws are not typically drafted very carefully. There is a certain thing that reminds me of that old saying, the dog who finally catches the car. Right? You've had people drafting these kinds of draconian and more draconian and more draconian prohibitions for years, and courts would just strike them down. Now all of a sudden, the dog has caught the car. They got it. The laws are coming into place, and we see that as a matter of legislative drafting, as a matter of legal language, they're so poorly done, nobody can figure them out. So, you know, I love lawyers. I am a lawyer. I make new lawyers, okay? I have no problem with lawyers, and sometimes lawyers have to be involved in certain kinds of medical decisions, but they should not be. We don't want them to be involved the way they are now. It's just wrong. Everything should be about the care of the patient. Everything. And instead, we have legal teams assisting medical teams trying to figure out when is the woman sick enough, when is her life threatened enough to allow an abortion to take place. And women are literally being allowed to become sick, become sicker, and in more distress in order to have the procedure that is obviously needed. This is not an accident, in my opinion. This is part of the intent and purpose of these laws. The whole idea is to make the cost, personal, legal, and everything else, high enough to discourage and stop abortion care when it is needed and wanted. There is no other way to view this, in my opinion. And as the doctor said, first, it is not going to end the need for abortion. It is not going to end having abortion. Now, some people in Texas and Oklahoma, whatever it is, they have the resources to travel to Pennsylvania or other places to be able to get a safe, legal abortion. Other people don't. Maybe they can be helped by an abortion fund. These things are being set up to assist people with just that set of problems. But lots of people who need this particular treatment are going to be deprived of it. They're going to carry pregnancies to term of unwanted pregnancies and pregnancies that are dangerous to their health, pregnancies where a child cannot and will not survive, and everybody knows it. All right? That's the situation that these laws are putting women in. And it is not, like I said, an accident. It is bringing uncertainty into medical treatment in a way that is designed to interfere with the physician's duty to care for the patient and to take a very important option away from the physician. I don't know how a young person trying to establish a practice in obstetrics and gynecology could consider moving to Ohio or lots of other places. We're going to have a whole generation of medical students who won't get the training in this. We're going to have lots of people sick, and some of them will die because of these laws. And that's just the reality of it. Now, you're going to have laws in all 25 or 28 of these states, whatever it is, and those laws are going to range from something like Ohio, which says 6 weeks fetal heartbeat. Some of them will have an exception for the endangering the life of the mother. And then what does that mean? And there'll be lots of figuring out and legal teams going in and out. Some of them, but not most of them, will have an exception for rape or incest. The Ohio law, which was in effect until this past week, a very strict Ohio law, was the one on the collision course with the 10-year-old rape victim. She was a rape victim, and she was pregnant. And the doctors in Ohio said, sorry, we can't do it. And she had to go to Indiana, where a doctor performed an abortion. Now, could not perform an abortion if I read Indiana's law right. A 10-year-old child would be forced to carry a baby to term, which I'm sure the doctor could tell you much better than I, is dangerous all by itself, even if it's a, quote, normal pregnancy in a 10-year-old girl. So what will we see looking forward? Well, number one, you're going to have states competing with one another to get more and more extreme. And I just picked out a few here. Since we've had a lot of discussion about Texas, I'd say that Texas and Oklahoma kind of win the sweepstakes. Texas, we've heard about, after 6 weeks, all abortions are banned except to save the life of the mother or if pregnancy risks a substantial impairment of bodily function. No exception for rape or incest. Providing abortion is punishable by life in prison and various big fines, like you'll pay them if you're in prison. Right? And then civilians can sue anybody involved in providing an abortion or assisting somebody to get an abortion. Oklahoma, not to be outdone, says all abortions are banned after fertilization. I know that, yeah, as opposed to before. I know the doctor's going to have something to say about that. Unless the life of the mother is at risk, it would be a felony punishable by up to 10 years in prison. Some exceptions in Oklahoma for miscarriages, ectopic pregnancies, and to save the life of the mother. and an exception for rape or incest, provided that rape or incest was reported to law enforcement and there's a police report on file. And Oklahoma also allows the private citizens lawsuit stuff. And this is just the beginning. I mean, those are and like I said, it's going to be a race to the bottom. This is what states are going to do. Courts will test all of these. I do predict some of them will be found to be beyond the pale. The Ohio statute, for instance, that was enjoined by an Ohio court just this past week, that argument was based on the state's own constitution. So the U.S. Constitution no longer protects the right to an abortion, but the judge decided the Ohio Constitution, which explicitly protects privacy, does protect it. All right, we'll see how that one shakes out. What we will see going forward, beyond abortion itself, we will see laws that try to restrict the use and availability of medications used for abortions that we were just talking about. We will see laws attempting to even more strongly criminalize people who assist a patient wanting an abortion, even if the abortion takes place where it's legal. Right? So Texas is going to try to punish people who take a person to the airport in Pennsylvania for an abortion if they came from Texas. I don't think that's going to really fly, but they're going to try it. I mean, I just have no doubt about that. There will be laws attempting to criminalize and put out of business these various abortion funds. And don't forget what Justice Thomas is ready to do. He's still lurking around the edges here. He's going to try to use the same reasoning in the Dobbs case to undermine and take away the right to use birth control. I anticipate attacks on same-sex marriage and sexual intimacy. And there will be attempts to extend what's sometimes called conscience protection. So a pharmacist doesn't want to dispense over-the-counter medication or other things. A physician in a state where abortion is legal does not want to give certain procedures. Those people will be protected. And it will only continue. This is just the beginning of what will be a fairly long struggle. And I promised at the beginning I would tell you why this keeps happening in the face of public opinion. Right now, the Supreme Court overturning Dobbs, they're not operating for or against public opinion, at least that's the hypothesis. They're operating on constitutional law. All right? There's no vote involved, they're not making a new statute, they're invalidating something that was on the books. But when Ohio is doing this, they're passing laws. It's a legislative body of elected people passing laws. So why are they doing this if in Ohio, support for abortion in most cases, and the exceptions, is at least at 50%? The answer goes back to something that troubles many aspects of our legal and political system. It's gerrymandering. It's the way that state legislatures, we think of gerrymandering in terms of congressional districts, but state legislatures were gerrymandered first. That's how those congressional districts got gerrymandered by state legislatures. Right? And that's what enables the most extreme members of the Ohio legislature to roll out these laws, even though they don't have anything like the kind of public support you would expect if a legislature was trying to pass laws that people really wanted. And this is happening in state after state after state. That is what is responsible for it. It's the same reason we're getting laws at the state level rolling back protections for LGBTQI people. It's the same reason we're going to have a tax on same-sex marriage. It is the same reason we are going to have all kinds of battles like that. People in the state legislatures no longer have to worry about their elections. That is anti-democratic, and that's why this is happening. So let me stop there. I know that was a lot of good news for you.
Okay. George, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. See if I can remember them in order.
I know getting into the details can get very ugly. What about the detail of this, which is, I know that poor people, in a sense, you're banning abortion because poor people can't travel and that kind of thing. Are there laws saying that if I'm traveling across the border from state A to state B in order to get an abortion, that I'm committing murder, I'm doing it to commit? Does that exist now, and can that exist in the future in any real way?
Okay, it's a great question. There is a constitutional right to travel amongst the states, right? It is established in law. When Texas or Oklahoma or whichever state does it first, or is the copycat, decides that it is going to try to criminalize the actions of its own citizens to come to Pennsylvania for an abortion, that will be the argument that they will have as that case goes up into the court system. But make no mistake, they will try it. And somebody's life will be turned upside down by that. I'm sorry, I can't.
Does it exist in any state right now?
Not now. It's coming. Be confident.
So play this out. Here's the quiz at the, I'm here. Here's the quiz at the end. Gerrymandering was started, by the way, at the state level in Massachusetts. So if you assume that, well, we believe that Jews believe that, that there's a certain way to look at things. Other people of, I use the term advisedly, good faith believe something else. They're in those gerrymandered districts. But if the number of people who are, let's say, left-leaning is increasing, doesn't that eventually overcome the gerrymandering?
Not
And I know the answer to this is to vote, but
Yeah,
where do we go from here in 10 or 20 years?
Yeah, you've asked a really great question and a broader question than just abortion, which is where I kind of left it, so it's a fair question. I'd say gerrymandering combined with the anti-voting rights legislation that you are seeing in state after state after state, plus the design of the Senate and its now filibuster rule, which was not part of its design, all three of these things are combining to keep power in the hands of fewer and fewer and fewer people. Because the great majority of people will already have attitudes on abortion, let's say, that don't fit what we're seeing in the legal realm, but they're safe to do it. If you not only gerrymander, but you take away the ability of people to vote, you can't overcome that.
Unless it comes, as we saw in Kansas, down to
Well, right. This is the great counterexample, the Kansas referendum. So if there is a referendum and the people can speak directly, you can speak on one issue.
Number 3, Phyllis, you and you were 4.
This is a question for you and also for the rabbi. There was a synagogue in southern Florida that brought suit under the Second Amendment. And I wondered if you knew what was happening with that, or are synagogues talking about that under freedom of religion?
Yeah, you're referring to a lawsuit brought by a synagogue somewhere in South Florida?
Yes.
And when Dobbs came out, they sued. They said basically, okay, you've got a decision there. It is about somebody else's religion, and you are prohibiting us from exercising our religious beliefs. Right? It's a very interesting argument, and like I said up front, we have a clash of religious values here. It has not gone anywhere yet, and I predict it's not going to succeed. There's a problem with any kind...
In the synagogue world and among rabbis, yes, there's definitely discussion about it. One of the interesting challenges is the rabbi himself at that synagogue is not an ordained rabbi from one of the major rabbinical schools. He was ordained online, and so his status as rabbi is interesting. As it happens, he also served in the Florida state legislature for a term or two. He's clearly very creative, and he's struck on something. But because of who he is, it makes it a little bit more complicated. Synagogues are definitely watching it. And the question of, are our religious rights being violated by the Dobbs decision is a very real live question among rabbis today. There's no, there are all sorts of views on it, but it's a very live conversation. And there are synagogues, I should say, that are sort of mobilizing with other like-minded folks to set up effectively underground railroads so that the person in need in West Virginia has a place to stay in Pittsburgh. And Temple Sinai is part of one of those networks. I'm willing to be a part of as many as we need to be, that I'm aware of, that I've heard of. There's one organized one so far. We're a part of it. And if I were to get the phone call, I know in 2 seconds we'd be able to help somebody and do what we need to do. When we put the banner up outside, talking about reproductive freedom as a Jewish value, the response has been fascinating. Overwhelmingly, the response has been positive. But overwhelmingly, that positive response has come from women. There have been a very few negative responses, and they have entirely been from men, which is it's a fascinating set of facts. I don't know how much more I want to read into it other than to just share it with you, because I think it says something about our society. Pittsburgh, for sure, has a separate set of issues of how much attention do we want to draw to ourselves because of what happened at Tree of Life. And I understand that. I will tell you from my own vantage point, the acts of one crazy man aren't going to stop me from doing what I think is the right thing to do. Now, I know I'm saying that as one who wasn't here then. And I know I'm saying that as one who is putting himself at risk to a degree. But I'm okay with that. For me, it gets to who I am at heart and soul. I don't want people feeling unsafe or uncomfortable coming into the synagogue, but I do want people to know that we have values and that we have principles and that we're going to stand up for them. And so whether that is having a sign outside or being part of a network that's reaching out to people, the answer is yes. We're going to continue to do that. I've been engaged in conversations with priests. Rabbi Gibson years ago put together a rabbi and priest dialogue, and I've been a part of it just the last number of months. I had a private conversation with a priest friend, and I said, what do you tell the mother who has an ectopic pregnancy that she can't get an abortion? It means she's losing her own life. What do you say to her? And the priest said to me, well, giving your life up for another is the biggest gift you can give. And I said, I understand that theologically, because I do. But how do you pastorally say that to somebody? And he said, it's where my theology is. I can't tell him his theology is wrong any more than he can tell me mine is wrong. The reality is we have a difference of opinion. And our laws need to figure out, somehow or another in this country, we've got to find a way so that our laws reflect that diversity of opinions without being overly offensive to anybody. That's a big challenge. That's a very high bar. And my gut is if law professors and doctors haven't figured that out by now, I'm not sure rabbis are going to be able to figure it out. The fact that the rabbis and the priests are talking with each other and having this conversation is vitally important. And that we've been able to be very direct with each other. I mean, he and I have had a very open private conversation about all of these issues, and we've been open with each other. And I've said, I looked at him and I said, theologically, I get it. Are you really comfortable saying that? And he looked at me and he said, it's what I have to say. Which was a very telling response. And it's where we are. I could pull up sections of Talmud very easily that show why we should allow abortion to save the life of a mother. I could also pull up sections from Talmud that would show why we should restrict abortion more and more. Our tradition is one that has multiple paths within it.
Always has.
Always has.
Yeah.
I mean, from the day Torah was given at Sinai, we disagreed and we haven't agreed since.
That's how you know you're in shul.
The magic of Sinai was that we were all together at least once.
Yeah, I'd like to bring up an example because some of my family lives in Utah, which is where I've been for the last 2 years, and now I moved back, and because I couldn't take it there. But my brother became LDS Mormon, and he honestly, I mean, life begins at conception. And so he sees the world very differently. Sure. And that's his religious belief. I mean, I don't agree with it, obviously, But that's, you know, and I don't know what you do with that, because there are many people, and who that's how they see the world.
The challenge and beauty of America is bridging that divide.
I don't know that he cares to. He doesn't really. He doesn't, you know, this is how it is, and this is how he sees the world, and I'm wrong and he's right.
Can I just offer
I know there are
one-
others who had hands up too.
I know, but there's one thing I want to say. Your conversation about sticking to your values is so important. And what it reminded me of was that rabbi in Texas who opened his door for the stranger, and that stranger held him and 2 congregants hostage. And fortunately, praise God, everybody escaped. But when asked afterwards, would he do it again? He said, absolutely.
Sure.
That's who we are.
That's who I know Charlie
That's
well.
who we are.
Charlie's an old friend. Charlie is one of 2 people in the world who knew my wife and me before we knew each other. And so Charlie and I go back, and Charlie and Melissa go way back. Charlie's telling the absolute truth. It's who he is. It's just in his soul.
Which is just the way you said it.
You know, Rabbi Gibson and I can both list you rabbis who exhibit that daily, and if you push us hard enough, we could probably list you rabbis who don't exhibit it enough.
So I actually ended up with 2 things, just one in response to Cecilia. He's entitled to his religious belief. He's not entitled to impose his religious belief on me. So, in other words, you don't believe in abortion, don't have abortion.
Yeah.
It's against your religion, it's against your religion. But I don't want to get into an argument, I just, quick comment on that. One of the things that's bothering me about the whole discussion that those of us who are pro-choice seem to have been slipping into is that and I guess it's politically it's more effective, you know, ectopic pregnancies, and I had early in my married life, I had something that would, you know, reinforce that. But we started off saying a woman's body is her own, and she has the choice of what to do with her own body. So if she decides that she can't handle this baby, she doesn't want a baby, it's not an ectopic pregnancy, it's not a life of the mother, but she's still entitled to that. And I think we shouldn't lose that completely.
I can tell you from a Jewish vantage point, life of the mother can be understood not just as a physical risk, but an emotional or spiritual risk to the mother's health as well. And so if the mother thinks that she's not capable or prepared to have that child, in a broad enough reading of the health of the mother, that would be included. And I would suggest that for most Reform and conservative rabbis, that's exactly the case. And as you move further into the Orthodox world, that starts to shift a little bit. But for the overwhelming majority of Reform and conservative rabbis, I would argue that definition of health of the mother is very broad.
So one of the reasons there are now suits being filed by rabbis on religious grounds against these new laws is because we have black letter law, Exodus 21:22, which specifically says that a fetus, if it's expelled in a fight between 2 men, who the pregnant woman gets in the way, is protected by the threat of a monetary fine. Whereas if a born person dies, then the punishment would be capital, which of course was legislated out of existence by our rabbis. There is no doubt that a fetus, a potential life which does not have a living relationship based on mitzvah to God, is of potential value, but not the same value as a born person who has a living, breathing relationship to God. It's not the way I've heard some Catholics put it, oh, the mother's had a life and the baby hasn't yet. That's not part of our consideration at all. And Rashi and Maimonides, 2 of our major expositors of law and text, firmly say that if the mother's life is in danger, it is treated either as a rodef, which is a pursuer to kill, or it does not have the right until it crowns, the greater part emerges from the womb. This is what I'm going to be teaching the ethics committee in December. And that's really, really important that we understand that we have incredibly strong religious ground to stand on. It's not the same as a woman's right of her own body, but it is to say that the woman's right is superior to the right of the potential life. And I think that's really, really important. I just want to quote a friend of mine. I saw it today. She does sonograms in the DC area. She is the wife of my best friend. And she says, she reposted, adoption is not an alternative to pregnancy, it's an alternative to parenthood. Abortion is an alternative to pregnancy. So, anyway, Jewishly, we are now finding liberal rabbis in Florida and other states who are entering into civil suits against the authorities that are passing these laws on First Amendment religious grounds. And that's a long speech, David, but do you have any comment about the First Amendment basis?
I do, yes. I think the religious basis for that suit is real, and the conflict of values is real. And going forward with that makes a lot of sense in the sense that the Supreme Court has been very busy for at least 10 years and more upholding religious objections to various kinds of civil obligations. Now, this is going to be harder because you have a collision of religious values. The problem from a legal point of view, I was going to answer this to the lady who asked this before, is finding the right way to get into a suit like that. Courts don't take suits just to declare who is right. There has to be a real conflict, what the federal courts call a case or controversy. The reason that rabbi in Florida is going to lose that suit is because he doesn't, except in his own religious beliefs, he doesn't literally have skin in the game.
He doesn't have standing.
And that's a very down-to-earth way of saying this is what courts look for. So it won't be easy, but I don't see any reason not to try.
Well, the courts, I mean, if we're going to be honest about it, the courts, the Dobbs case wasn't the first opportunity to overturn Roe.
No.
In a sense, they went case shopping until they got the right one, and the court happened to have the right personnel at the right time and the pieces came together. The same sort of thing will have to happen the other way. Mm-hmm. The question is, how many generations is it going to take?
Yeah, I mean, from a political standpoint, I feel like the anti-abortion crowd, be that whoever, the politicians, people, whoever, congregations, have been organized, have been putting people in judge positions, have been looking at the long game. And the pro-choice crowd has not been doing that. So from a political standpoint, people on that side are behind. I wanted to add two things, if I could, and one is, Rabbi, I think the rest of that is that the monetary reward goes to the husband. The woman gets nothing, just saying.
That's true.
If my understanding of that is correct.
I will say one last thing, because we believe that Orthodox people are in general much more strict about abortion. In 1919, the Orthodox rabbi Yitzhak Unterman said that a woman could get an abortion on account of her nivul, her shame. Her shame alone, i.e. her emotional well-being,
right,
was important enough a consideration for her to be permitted by an Orthodox authority to have an abortion.
Yeah, I think that I've certainly seen situations where women have made a choice to continue a pregnancy in the face of a serious health threat to themselves. For example, they defer treatment of a cancer. But that's her choice when she makes that choice. It is not imposed on her. The other thing, I meant to say this before, and I just want to throw this statistic out to you. Half the pregnancies in the United States are unplanned. That doesn't mean unwelcome, but unplanned. And of that half, presently, or up until a few years ago, about half ended in abortion. The number of abortions has been going down. the number of unwanted pregnancies hasn't really been going down. So that side that is trying to prevent abortion is winning.
Hi, I just had a question. I work in homeless prevention. That's my job. I work with a social services agency, and that still relates. How is abortion not having abortion? I know Pennsylvania, but I'm thinking about other places. How would that affect the homeless population or people who don't have like, I know you guys talked about people who are low income, but I mean people who could be living on the streets or living doubled up with a friend or other like people seeking like emergency shelters. How would that affect it?
I think in general, the answer is that the more you're talking about people who are on the margins of society, which is what you're describing, the more impact this decision, any new law that restricts any medical care, but abortion particularly, the greater impact it will have on that group. So if you live in a state that prohibits abortion or restricts it greatly, and you are also poor, unhoused, hungry, whatever the case may be, addicted to opioids, the impact on you is going to be greater because your life situation is already fairly precarious.
We've got time just for the last couple of questions here.
A question for the doctor, and I ask it as a physician, but I'm not OBGYN, and I'm not experienced as you are. I don't think we can look to medical science, to solve this 100%. I don't think, although I think one day people will wind up being bots, but that's a whole other story. There will never be a way to prevent an unwanted pregnancy 100%, no matter who's running Google or who's making the latest iPhone. Would you agree with that statement?
I would.
Thank you.
We have one more up here.
I think you got the last one.
The enforcement mechanism in the Texas law seems to turn every citizen into a bounty hunter. Is there a test case begun with this to test whether this whole mechanism is constitutional?
Not yet.
Not yet.
There's bound to be. Even well before Dobbs, when the Texas law was on the books, people were looking at that and expecting that when the Supreme Court finally did get around to the Texas case, they would strike that part down. There's too much extraterritorial reach to that. It was also pointed out that politically, okay, so you want California to go after people with guns in Texas? How about that? Right. Yeah. So those kind of things, I just don't think that can stand. But remember that that's only one of the enforcement mechanisms in the Texas law. The greater enforcement mechanism is regular old law enforcement. And they're going to go after anybody who might have gotten an abortion, provided an abortion. I mean, there's going to be plenty to talk about, even if that thing is never used.
Thank you all. First of all, thank you, David. Thank you, Kathy, for being a part of this evening. Thank you all for being here with us. We'll break now for Oneg is joy. I don't know how much joy there is after this discussion, but at least there's joy in being together. So I hope you can join us for our reception, and we'll meet back here at about 10 till 10 for our service, for the Slichot service. So hope you can stick around. Thank you all very much.
Check 1, 2. Are you ready?
Rabbi Gibson, come on up here.
This service will begin on page 99. ליהודים הייתה הורה ושמחה וששון בעיקר. ליהודים הייתה הורה ושמחה וששון בעיקר. כן תהיה לנו, תהיה לנו, תהיה לנו, כן תהיה לנו, תהיה לנו, תהיה לנו. ליהודים הייתה הורה ושמחה וששון בעיקר. ליהודים הייתה הורה ושמחה וששון בעיקר. כן תהיה לנו, תהיה לנו, תהיה לנו, כן תהיה לנו, תהיה לנו, תהיה לנו. ליהודים הייתה הורה ושמחה וששון בעיקר. Page 100, we will join together in our Havdalah blessings. Ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 ya la la. La 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 la, ya la 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 la, la 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 la, ya la 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 ya la la. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen, borei peri hagafen. Ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 ya la la. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei minei v'samim, borei minei v'samim. Ya la 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 la, la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Borei meorei ha'esh Borei meorei ha'esh Yalai la 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 Yalai la 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 Yalai la 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 Yalai la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la la Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamavdil ben kodesh lechol hamavdil ben kodesh lechol ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la la ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la la Hamavdil ben kodesh lechol chatotenu hu yimchol zarenu v'chaspenu yarbek hachol v'chakochavim balayla shavua tov shavua tov shavua tov shavua tov Shavua tov, Shavua tov, Shavua tov, Shavua tov. A good week, a week of peace. May gladness reign and joy increase. A good week, a week of peace. May gladness reign and joy increase. Eliyahu Hanavi. Eliyahu Hatishbi, Eliyahu, Eliyahu, Eliyahu Hagiladi, Bimhera v'yamenu, Yavo Eleinu, Imashiach ben David, Imashiach ben David. There's also words here for Miriam Haniviyah. If you look on page 103, join in with me. Miriam Haniviyah, Oz v'zimram b'yadam. Miriam tirkoditanu lehagdil zimrat olam. Miriam tirkoditanu letakein et ha'olam. Bimhera v'yamenu, hitevienu, el meha Yeshua, el meha Yeshua. Miriam Haniviyah, Oz v'zimra b'yadam, Miriam tirkoditanu, Lehagdil zimrat olam. Shavua tov. Page 104, Hashivenu. Hashivenu, Hashivenu, Adonai Elecha. V'nashuva, v'nashuva, Chanesh, Chanesh, Yameinu kekedem.
On 105, we join together. Last sliver of the moon, the waning crescent, small in splendor, glowing in the east, at the end of the journey, a curve of silver barely there, that fades away with the dawn, faintest light the eye can discern, like the soul within me, barely there, waning and weary as the year winds down, At the end of the journey, the old moon flickers out and darkness awaits the new. Now in the stillness, we can feel it being born. Remind us the horizon will be bright again. The waxing crescent will rise, heal our hearts, gather us in from the darkness, restore the light within us.
Orzaru ala Sadiq. Orzaru ala Sadiq. O Yisrael Simcha. Orzaru ala Sadiq. O Yisrael Simcha. Ya la 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 ya la la ya la la.
On 106, we continue together. The psalmist sang, "At midnight I rise to give thanks and praise." And so we come to this hour of slichot under the canopy of night to celebrate goodness, to proclaim what is right and true, to praise, to thank, to bless the great giver who gives and renews our lives. We turn to loved ones, to friends, and to our people everywhere, the whole house of Israel. And our hearts turn toward the human family. We pray for its healing. Yet hardest of all is the inward gaze, the return to ourself, the honest reckoning of the soul, cheshbon hanefesh. We ask how to account for selfish acts, lies, and senseless anger, how to account for the shadows, the storms, the bitterness in our lives, the damage and distress we cause, how to own up to it all and find our way back with integrity, in peace. We ask, have we the will to change? And if not now, when?
Pitchu li sharei tzedek avov amodam. 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 Pitchu li sharei tzedek avov amodam.
We take a moment for personal reflection. I invite you to join with me as we read silently on page 110.
Shomer Yisrael, Shmo Sheritz Yisrael, ואל יאבד ישראל, האומרים שמע ישראל. שומר גוי אחד, שמו שארית עם אחד, ואל יאבד גוי אחד, המייחדים שמך. אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אחד.
We turn ahead now to page 113, and we join together at the top. We are taught days are scrolls, write on them only what you want remembered. But we remember our weakness, and our days bear the mark of all that went wrong. On this night we have hope in the one who sustains us. Though we stumble and falter, you promise forgiveness. If we stray from the truth, you do not forsake us. If we sink to the depths, your mercy uplifts us. If our urges betray us, your compassion is endless. If we distance ourselves, you do not disdain us. If we abandon your teachings, still you embrace us. If we seek you sincerely, your presence surrounds us. If we pray from the heart, you listen with yours. Though we stumble and falter, we are blessed by your promise. We continue on page 117.
Ki anu amecha ve'ata Eloheinu, anu vanecha ve'ata avinu, anu avadecha ve'ata Adonenu, anu kehalecha ve'ata chelkenu, anu nachalatecha ve'ata goralenu, anu tzonecha ve'ata ro'enu, anu charmecha ve'ata notrenu, anu ve'ulatecha ve'ata yotzrenu, anu rayatecha ve'ata dodenu, anu segulatecha ve'ata kirovenu, anu amecha ve'ata malkeinu, anu ma'amirecha ve'ata ma'amirenu.
On 119, we continue together. Notice the river at break of dawn, a braid of streams, creeks, and brooks, a dance of insects near the shore. Notice how brackish where the river meets the sea, how with grace the river hugs the shore, fierce in its rising, fiercer when it falls. Notice it all, how it bends, how it tells the time of year, and how smooth the boulders are that guide its course. Notice the Holy One in blessing and in beauty, in acts of repair, in the unearthing of truth, in eyes that meet, in the tumult of change, in words of forgiveness, in the bridges we build to those we hurt, in the flow of a year, in the course of a journey, in rising and falling, in the bend of a river, in the hand we hold out to those who hurt us, in the life we are living, in blessing and in beauty. We join together on the next page, page 120. I invite everyone to rise in body or spirit.
Adonai, Adonai, Erachum v'chanun Adonai, 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 Erachum v'chanun Adonai, Erech apayim v'rav chesed, ואמת אדוני, נוצא חסד לאלפים, נושא עוון ופשע, וחטא ונקה. אדוני, אדוני, רחום וחנון, אדוני, 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 רחום וחנון, אדוני, ערך אפיים ורב חסד ואמת, אדוני, נוצא חסד לאלפים, נושא עוון ופשע, וחטא ונקה. אדוני, אדוני, רחום וחנון, אדוני, 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 רחום וחנון, אדוני. שלושה דברים, על שלושה דברים, על שלושה דברים, העולם עומד, על שלושה דברים, על שלושה דברים, על שלושה דברים, העולם עומד, על התורה ועל העבודה ועל גמילות חסדים, על התורה ועל העבודה ועל גמילות חסדים, על שלושה דברים, על שלושה דברים, על שלושה דברים, העולם עומד, על שלושה דברים, על שלושה דברים, על שלושה דברים, העולם עומד. Page 124. Yana himsacha mekomcha na'ale v'na'alam ve'analo himsacha kivodcha malei olam. Yana himsacha mekomcha na'ale v'ne'elam ve'analo emsa'acha kivodcha malei olam. Darashti kirvatcha b'chol libi kiraticha uvtseiti likratcha likrati mitzaticha. Darashti kirvatcha b'chol libi kiraticha uvtseiti likratcha likrati mitzaticha. Yanam sacha mekomcha na'ale v'ne'elam ve'ana emsa'acha kivodcha malei olam.
Please be seated. We continue on page 127 at the top of the page. As the days of awe near, we reach for the infinite. Mindful of our frailty, we seek the holy. Despite our mortality, we carry within us the Ancient of Days. Despite loneliness within, we sense that we belong to a single soul, a spirit that fills the entire universe. Let us find in that universal spirit a new source of strength and significance, more compassion, more generosity, more gratitude for life. Let our hearts be open to self-reckoning, and may we grasp how vital to our lives is teshuvah, the path of return. On this night of forgiveness, we confess our wrongs and take account of sins, failures of judgment, weakness of will. The hour is late, our needs to be forgiven, profound. And we turn ahead to page 128 and begin the first what will be many recitations of our shortcomings. Hashamnu, Bagadnu, Gazalnu, Dibarnu Dofi, He'evinu, Vihirshanu, Zadnu, Hamasnu, Tifalnu Shaker, Yatsnu Ra, Kizavnu, Latsnu, Maradnu, Niatsnu, Sararnu, Havinu, Pashanu, Tsararnu, Kishinu Oref, Rashanu, Sichatnu, Ta'avnu, Ta'inu, Titanu. We abused and abandoned, we acted without thinking. We coveted and corrupted, we coerced the weak to do our will. We enticed and enslaved, we exalted money and material goods. We gravitated to those who gossip, we gave up our ideals and gave in to our impulses. We ignored and idolized, we insisted that we were right. We killed, We were knowingly unkind. We kept to ourselves in the face of need. We missed the mark and minimized our mistakes. We mocked what we did not understand. We overreached and overreacted, too often erupting in outbursts of anger. We quelled the voice of conscience within us. We quit too soon and quarreled too often. We spurned the wisdom of our tradition. We squabbled and we scorned. We issued ultimatums and made ugly threats. We uttered untruths and undermined with cynicism. We wasted time, strength, and talent. We wallowed in self-pity, wished but did not act. We yearned too much for prizes and praise and failed to share fully in the joy of Zion reborn. And we continue on the next page. Al chet shechatanu lefanecha ba'ones u'verazon. The ways we have wronged you under duress and by choice. V'al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'zidadun v'shgaga.
The harm we have caused in your world deliberately and by mistake.
Al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'galui u'v'sater.
The ways we have wronged you openly and secretly.
V'al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'yodiim u'v'lo yodiim.
The harm we have caused in your world consciously and unconsciously.
Al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'sinat chinam.
The ways we have wronged you by hating without cause.
V'al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'richilut.
The harm we have caused in your world through gossip and rumor.
Al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'tzarut ayin.
The ways we have wronged you through a selfish or petty spirit.
V'al chet shechatanu lefanecha be'imutz halev.
The harm we have caused in your world by hardening our hearts.
Ve'al kulam Elohai slichot, slach lanu, machal lanu, kaper lanu.
For all these failures of judgment and will, God of forgiveness, forgive us, pardon us, lead us to atonement. Ve'al kulam Eloah selichot, selach lanu mechal lanu kaper lanu. Ve'al kulam Eloah selichot, selach lanu mechal lanu, selach lanu mechal lanu kaper lanu.
We turn ahead now to page 134 and 135 as we join together in Shema Kolenu.
Shema Kolenu Adonai Eloheinu Chus v'rachem aleinu. Shema Kolenu Adonai Eloheinu Chus v'rachem aleinu. V'kabel b'rachamim u'v'ratzon et tefilateinu, ki el shomea tefilot v'tachanunim. Ata Shema Kolenu Adonai Eloheinu
virachem aleinu. Shema koleinu Adonai Eloheinu Chus virachem aleinu. Ya la 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 Ya la ya la 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 Ya la 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 Ya la 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 ya la 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 Ya la 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 Ya la ya la 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 Ya la 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 Ya la 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 ya la 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 la.
And as we conclude our Selichot service, we turn to page 141. We enter into Avinu Malkeinu, a prayer asking for God to listen to us, to hear us, to help us turn and make the new year better. Avinu Malkeinu Shema Kolenu. Avinu Malkeinu, almighty and merciful, hear our voice. Avinu Malkeinu Chatanu Lefanecha. Avinu Malkeinu, we have strayed and sinned before you. Avinu Malkeinu Chamol Aleinu V'Yalol Aleinu V'Tapenu. Avinu Malkeinu, have compassion on us and on our families. Avinu Malkeinu Kalei Dever V'Cherev V'Ra'av Me'aleinu.
Avinu Malkeinu, halt
the onslaught of sickness, violence, and hunger. Avinu Malkeinu Kalei Kol Tsar Umastin Ma'aleinu.
Avinu Malkeinu, halt the reign of those who cause pain and terror.
Avinu Malkeinu Kadvenu B'Sefer Chayim Tovim.
Avinu Malkeinu, enter our names in the book of lives well lived.
Avinu Malkeinu Chadesh Aleinu Shana Tova Umetuka. Avinu Malkeinu, renew us for a year of goodness.
Avinu Malkeinu, Chonenu Vanenu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chonenu Vanenu, Ki ein banu masim. Aseh imanu et tzedakah v'chesed. Aseh imanu tzedakah v'chesed v'hoshienu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chonenu vanenu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chonenu vanenu, Ki ein banu masim. Aseh imanu et tzedakah v'chesed. Aseh imanu tzedakah v'chesed v'hoshienu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chonenu vanenu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chonenu vanenu, Ki ein banu masim.
Invite everyone to rise in body or spirit for the sounding of the shofar.
Tekiah, Tekiah, Tekiah Gedolah. Shavua Tov. Yes, sir.